Hi, I'm DV LeBron with the Ellis Talker Show. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have a special guest. I have our local weatherman, Mr. Kevin Crouch. But before I go into that, I wanted to pay the bills. If you have insurance needs, Miss Andrea Walton is part of the community. She can get you covered, your auto, your home, and other things. There are other things that State Farm offers. And Miss Andrea Walton has been involved in the community and cares about the people here. So she would love to go ahead and give you a quote and get you started. Just let her know DV sent you. How you doing, Kevin? Thank you so much for coming back.
DV, I am fantastic. I am getting ready for what looks like a little bit of weather this week, but it's a great day to get out and talk to folks. And I love that Andrea Walton is sponsoring you as well. She sponsors Ellis County Weather, and she is a great member of our community. Just a great asset. So that's really great too. But I'm kind of watching things today, and it's been an interesting opportunity to kind of get back on a springtime footing in November. So bit of a different time right now, but it's fun.
Yeah, we get them in the spring, and then we sometimes we get them in the later parts of the year. And I heard that I watched something the other day that they're a little tamer on this side of the year, but I don't know the validity of that. I was watching a documentary. There's a bunch of stuff on Netflix too that they put on about natural disasters, and so I was watching the Twister one, and they were going through all of that. But I saw you the other day in front of the Texas Theater.
Yep.
And I approached you and I thanked you, and I want to thank you again online and so everybody could see, because there's been times when my family has huddled, and I'm sure there's other families that had to huddle in their bathroom, and they could hear your voice coming through as a tornado is probably bearing down or could possibly be bearing down, and it's your voice there telling them to hunker down, to be careful, and caring about them. So for that, I wanted to thank you personally, because that's happened to me, and I know that it's happened to thousands of others in Ellis County. So thank you so much for doing this for your community.
It's a pleasure, and this was a dream of mine from childhood, and I started as a child who was terrified of severe weather. I could not function when I knew there was severe weather coming, but I overcame that fear by researching and learning how to be more prepared. And then that led to just learning about weather in general. And that led to being fascinated by it. And so, I enjoy everything from the crazy heat. I don't personally enjoy the heat. I hate, sweating and that kind of thing, but I enjoy what goes into it and looking into the bigger picture and figuring out what it is that goes into these events. And so the fact that I am in a position now where I can help people feel more confident and feel more secure during severe weather, it really brings it home, and it really makes all the hard work worth it.
Well, I'm glad that you decided to get into meteorology, and I'm sad that it was the fear of it, but then the fear led you to such an interest in it. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of ask you some questions about weather, some that people may not know or may not have ever heard. So how is it that, okay, 3 days in advance, you say, hey, it looks like there's going to be a possibility for a severe storm in this area. Kind of in layman's term, what shows up, what tells you that is coming?
So earlier today, I posted a video update, kind of explaining some of that, kind of going into some of the different factors that are going into, as we're filming this, an event that's coming up tomorrow. And you really kind of have to look at it in terms almost of an equation. And I don't mean the really needy equations that you see sometimes in meteorology. I don't mean the physics and all that kind of thing. I mean, look at the different parts of an equation and look at the different ingredients, if you will, in a storm to try to figure out what exactly all of that is leading to. So to use tomorrow as an example, today there's low clouds and it's real muggy outside. So we have this warm moisture coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, and we have this strong south wind that's blowing that heat in. but we have a Pacific cold front coming in. So naturally, when you have the heat and the cold in place, that's going to mean something's going to happen. We also have a dry line, and that's where dry air and moist air are going to compete. And that's another indication that you're going to have storms. And then we have a split in the jet stream. So all of these kinds of different indications, and we can look at weather models, we can look at current conditions and kind of get an idea of what we're looking at going forward and those kinds of things. So it's just an understanding of the different aspects, the different ingredients that go into a weather situation like this, see what position they're in, what they're expected to do, and then kind of figure out they're all going to meet in this one place and what do conditions look like when all those things happen.
Right. And what it you I'm sure you've heard about the, and this goes into predicting. I'm sure you heard about wait, the weather's this, wait 15 minutes. It's Texas.
Yeah.
Why is Texas so varied like that? Why is there some truth to that?
So it's a great question, and this is one of the things that I'm always fascinated about when it comes to weather. And I think the reason that there's so many Texans that are interested in what the weather's doing, because we do get to see a wide variety of different things. We see everything from droughts to tornadoes to hurricanes. So Texas is in a position where we have the Gulf of Mexico, which sends warm, moist air, as we've just talked about. We have dry air that comes out of Mexico and from the deserts out west. Then we have the cold air that blows in from from up north, from Canada and from the Rocky Mountains and those areas. And then we have the Pacific fronts like we have right now that we're watching. So we are in a position where we are perfectly placed to get all of these different ingredients. So Texas is large enough, of course, that we've got several kind of different climates throughout the year that different parts of the state will see. So the fact that we have a Gulf of Mexico that's so warm, and that's why hurricanes do so well there. We're in the perfect position to get that warm Gulf air. We get that desert air from our west, the cold air from the north. So we're kind of just in a spot where all of these different climates contribute different aspects of our severe weather. And you get closer to the equator, and most places it's just warm and humid all the time. You get further north, it's kind of just cooler all the time. So Texas is kind of in this unique position where we have all of these different air masses coming together, and we're just in a spot where they just happen to meet. They got to meet somewhere. And we probably have one of the most, this area has some of the most varied weather out of any part of the country, because all the different other places that have a lot of the weather the same, all year round, whatever their weather is being brought over here, the parts of it, we're in a good spot where we can get different air masses coming together, and we see what happens when that kind of conflict occurs in the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting the way all these things come together in this spot. So I imagine that leads to all the randomness in that. So I heard something about the La Nina and La Nino and or El Nino and La Nina and how that affects. And we had a really, really hot summer, and it just kept going. So what are the predictions for winter, and how do they come up with that?
I was just doing a discussion with a local gardening group here in Waxahachie, answering that question. And that's one of the common questions I get right now, because we had 2 winters back to back with pretty big freezes. Fortunately, the second freeze was not as destructive as the first was back in 2021, February of 21, I believe it was. And so when people ask me, what kind of winter are we going to have? Usually what they're asking is, are we going to have a freeze like we had before? It's hard to know. And the fact of the matter is that the winter of 2020 to 2021, from December 20 to February of 21, was really a pretty mild winter, except for, of course, that 8 days where we were below freezing. So for us, we're going to remember that. And we're going to think, well, we're just going to be focused on whether or not we're going to get that kind of a major event, not really the season as a whole. this coming season, it looks like it's our third La Nina season of winter, and one would imagine that if it's going to be like the other two, then we're going to have a week of bad winter weather. That's not always the case, though. So El Nino and La Nina, those trends do factor in. Uh, and you also look at kind of where things have come already. And to speak even more broad than that, to talk about kind of how we see these trends and how that can affect folks outside of that context, we have had a pretty dry year. We had a very dry, so what we were behind starting in spring, okay, possibly earlier than that. So we had a pretty dry spring. We had that terrible summer, and fall so far really hasn't been very much help. Winter usually is pretty dry in North Texas. That's not really abnormal. So then we get back into the next spring, which spring is never really our rainiest time. Usually it's the fall. So if we are still not really that rainy next spring, we could be in for a terrible summer next summer. So we can even look at trends going forward to kind of figure out what some of those effects will be. But those long range forecasts are so broad, and they're guesses. We have had like I say, times when we predicted a warmer than usual and drier than usual winter, and then we got a huge winter storm in the middle of it. And that's all people are going to remember. But it's just a matter of looking at some of those ocean currents and what's happening over the course of the fall, the summer and fall, to kind of figure out, okay, here's where trends are going. This is kind of what we can expect the result to be, to get an idea for the following season. So that's kind of a broad answer, but that's really the best way that the Climate Prediction Center can try to take a look at an upcoming season.
Before I proceed, just in quickly, what is El Nino and Nina?
So I'm always terrible at explaining this because I always get them mixed up. It's one of my Achilles heels, one of my weaknesses. It has to do with water temperatures and therefore air temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. And so we can see what these trends are doing. And El Nino and La Nina are two phenomena that can affect worldwide weather. So we take a look at what these currents are doing in the Pacific Ocean, and that tells us it's either El Nino or La Nina. So a La Nina, traditionally for our area, is usually in the wintertime going to mean a drier, warmer winter. And then El Nino can be the opposite. So it's just speaking generally, El Nino, La Nina are trends that we're watching in the Pacific Ocean to see what the water currents, the water temperatures, and therefore some of the atmospheric conditions are going to be off the coast, I believe, of South America there, to get an idea of what that is. Kind of, if you've seen the movie Butterfly Effect, that's the way I kind of like to explain it. So to see what those currents are doing and how that will then affect the weather in North America as well as the rest of the world. So that's kind of a broad explanation of that without getting too detailed and too in the weeds.
No, it's all good. It's just those are terms that are mentioned often. And I kind of wanted the audience kind of to know what and how they affect the weather. You found yourself in situations where you personally, your family could be hurt by weather. Yet you've stayed on and you've talked to the rest of us and talked us through as storms were coming. How is that? How does that affect you, and what's going through your mind when you're looking at these things and these things are happening outside of you? Do you think about like the actual what they're going through out there, like you're going through? I'm sorry, I can't word that any better, but
you're that's totally on point, and I do. It really is a big responsibility of mine to take myself and my personal concerns out of play to make sure that I'm staying calm, that I'm staying clear for the people who are watching my broadcast. So yeah, I think about that all the time. And I mean, there will be times where I'll, maybe be texting off camera where you can hear, or rather you can tell that I'm communicating with somebody. I'm probably sending a message to my wife saying, go in the bathroom. And that's happened multiple times where I'm in front of this big screen right here, but I can see that something is headed to our area. and I want her to go ahead and take precautions. The good news is my studio is literally across the hall from the bathroom. So if I need to duck, I can. And I have contingency plans too to continue the broadcast from there. But I want to try to stay on as long as I can to make sure that the rest of the many people that may be in the path of that storm have that information. Going outside of my home, I've been in Ellis County my entire life. My family has been in Ellis County for at least a century. So I know this county. I know the people here. I have family here. So anytime there's a storm heading to one place or another, odds are I know someone there, or I'm very aware of how vulnerable that community might be. So it is something that I kind of have to keep that in the back of my mind, but it's always there. One example I can use is we had the tornado that went through South Waxahachie a year or two ago. And I was very aware that the area that was heading towards, not only was it heading towards I-35, but the area it was going to be moving through has a lot of mobile homes and double wides and very vulnerable structures. So in the back of my mind, I'm very, very nervous about what is going to transpire there. And I said on the air, I said, in the name of all that is holy, please take cover. And that's not my proudest moment because I showed a little more emotion than I really wish I had. So that kind of let my professionalism fall by the wayside a little bit. But it shows that it's really, really hard sometimes to hide that emotion and to not be personally invested when I'm so aware of those communities. And, these are folks that I know, these are folks that I love that will be affected by it. But when it comes down to it, I need to be clear and concise and straightforward for the people that I know and the people that I don't, all of whom are equal targets for these storms.
Is that equipment that you have, and you have some pretty cool equipment and it's gotten better? Does that equipment kind of tell you, hey, there's a twister right there? There's actual twister, like, 100%, or does it give you kind of okay, it's got all the stuff that would be a twister? Is that kind of how it goes?
So there's a process to all this, and there's different degrees of confirmation, different degrees of suspicion to that. It's a great question. So really there's kind of two ways in my own operation that I can, indicate a tornado, or at least indicate one is coming. I'm using radar. That's what's behind me on the screen. That's what I'm looking at. So whether it's the radar that's, on the monitor where I'm watching behind me, or, I have a different screen right below the camera where I can kind of monitor a different view. And that way I kind of have eyes on different things all at the same time. And I can see through radar where there's rotation. There are ways, depending on the situation, that radar can confirm a tornado is on the ground. There is a radar, its correlation coefficient is the product, but it shows where rain is falling, but then it can show where in the middle of that or in close proximity to it, there's lift. Okay. That's debris being lifted by the tornado. So there are rare occasions, and it's getting better. We're getting better at recognizing those things. The technology is getting better, but there's nothing like ground truth. And what ground truth is where you have storm spotters or storm chasers that radio in, okay, yeah, there's a tornado on the ground. That, to me, that's when I feel the most confident. Unfortunately, in Ellis County, we don't always have the most spotters on the game. We don't always have the most eyes out there, and we tend to get storms at night. It's just they tend to pop up to our west and then move in. By the time they get here, usually it's at night. So it's hard for us to really get a whole lot of ground truth. So we do have to rely heavily on radar. But for the most part, we try to warn the public, and the National Weather Service tries to issue warnings before the tornado happens. So we try to catch, here's where the rotation is intensifying. Here's a spot where a tornado could happen at any moment, right? So we try to warn those places that are in the path of sufficient rotation. And I've had more than one tornado that was never warned, right? Or never really paid attention to by the Dallas media or the National Weather Service, whatever. And I had to be the one to say, okay, there's no warning on this, but from what I'm seeing, I am confident that this area is under the gun. So it's just it's a matter of, and this is what I'm going to be talking about at Sims Library this Saturday at 11:30. If anybody wants to go there, but the importance of communication, and this is a big part of it, that I have to be as accurate as I can, but I also have to trust my gut. So there's a lot of judgment calls, and there's a lot of just trying to make sure that I'm being conservative. I'm being clear, but at the same time, that if I see something, I say something because I know what I'm looking at.
When we were talking, you were worried about crying wolf, that kind of situation. Crying wolf, that can be a very bad thing when predicting weather. And you're right. There's been times when you were predicting, you were saying, "Hey, this doesn't look good," and we were getting nothing from Dallas media. But that's why it's awesome that you're here, that you get to do that, that you do that for your community, because you're right here. You're seeing what you're paying attention to, the little things that they don't really have time for yet. Maybe one day they will, but as of right now, they don't. They don't have time for us. So you get on there. So, I kind of wanted to roll into the fun questions. How often do you get blamed for the weather?
Well, I'm not Pete Delkus. I don't take credit for the snow days, so I don't quite get the blame so much. But every now and then, somebody will tell me, I really wish you would have made it rain yesterday, that kind of thing. It's all in jest, but there are times where people tell me, I really wish this would have gone differently, and I'm usually in that boat. I will tell people, I want it to rain as much as possible this fall. Because we talked about how farmers are struggling with the drought conditions that we've had. So I'm able to empathize with people and let them know, hey, if I had control of the levers, the weather would be very different. We would have had plenty of rain and that kind of thing. But I don't think I've ever really had a lot of real complaints or anything like that. It's all in good fun, and it makes for a great conversation with people.
What's the funnest thing about this particular because I don't know if you're doing it, like me. I have my day job and then I have this, and I think you had told me I went full time, but I'm not sure. What is the funnest thing about doing this?
I am full time, and that is strictly by the grace and support of this community. Companies that sponsor this company that have made that possible for me. And really, I couldn't do Ellis County Weather any other way, because if I was working a full-time job and I'm, stuck there when weather happens, I mean, I'm not going to be able to cover things the way they need to be done. So I am blessed to do this real time. The funnest for me is, a lot of people think that when I'm doing the severe weather coverage, it's fun. And in a way it is. But the only drawback to that is that I'm always in the studio, right? The most fun I have is not only when I get to do public events. So like we met at Texas Country Reporter Festival and had a chat there. That's one of the fun parts of it. I love going to schools, talking to the kids. That's always a rewarding experience. Hearing from people about, like I mentioned, when I've been able to ease their storm anxiety and that kind of thing. But the thing that tops it is being able to be outside, actually experiencing weather phenomena happening. One example that always blows people away is that about a year ago, it was last winter, I'm pretty sure, there was a really strong cold front coming in. And I have a spot west of me, or northeast of me, actually, nearby, where I can go kind of on a hill and observe weather and observe what's happening. So I had the opportunity to observe a cold front coming in, and usually cold fronts bring rain and storms. So I'm here in a studio, but it was a dry front. So it was coming in, and I was going to actually get to go out there and feel the wind change, feel that stark difference. So I'm standing there, and the wind, the south wind, that humid, warm south wind is at my back, and it's just howling. And then it stops. Just still. And I know it's coming. So I have a little handheld anemometer, which tells me wind speed and then thermometer and that kind of thing too. So I've got these instruments out there to kind of measure that change, and I'm waiting for that cold front. And that first cool puff hits me, and you feel the chill on your face. And I smelled smoke. Here's the thing: I looked ahead of me, and there were no bonfires or anything like that going on. I looked at it later. It was grass fires in Oklahoma. that the smoke had been carried by the cold front down to our area. And it was just for the briefest moment, but right on the front end of that cold front, some of that smoke had been blown in. So that first puff, I could smell that smoke from those fires. So to be outside and actually experience what is happening, and then other times to be able to be out there and see something coming and then go and watch it. One of the things that is kind of fun when those cold fronts are coming in is to watch the planes, watch the airplanes, because when you start seeing Southwest Airlines airplanes circling overhead in our area, normally that means the wind has changed to the north at Love Field in Dallas because they're coming into land in the wind. So whether I'm out there with a cold front coming in or out there with a dry line where there's a line of clouds and then it's just, cloud cover and then just nothing, to experience those things changing and that those phenomena happening is got to be the best part, because there's no classroom like nature.
That sounds pretty darn amazing. And I've heard you when you said, you're actually going to feel if you're out there, you'll feel that north wind coming. I've heard you say something like that. So now I'm going to give you the box to talk about some of the things that you need, just talk to the community in general. And then also if you could give an update about, I'm going to air this tonight. So if you could give an update about tomorrow.
All right. So just go to elliscountyweather.com. That's the best place to start. You can find links to any of the social media places. Really, the best place to watch for coverage, video coverage, live coverage, and get video updates is YouTube. The quality is just best there. Facebook tends to compress things. It's just the way it is. So make sure you go to the YouTube page and hit the bell too, so that you're notified not only when I post a video update, but when those live streams begin. You want to make sure you have that so that when severe weather is coming, when I've gone live. And I usually really only go live when severe weather starts, because if I went live all the time, people wouldn't pay attention to it. So make sure you do that. Just go to elliscountyweather.com, see all I have to offer there. And really, that's the main thing, is just get people plugged in, get people included, share the page, share the website, however you want to do that. Just make sure that folks are tuned in. There's a lot of new people moving to Ellis County that are trying to figure out what the weather's like here, that don't really know how to be up to date. So make sure you're sharing it with them as well. And as far as tomorrow, we're by the time this airs, I'm sure there will be more information, and I'll be posting a severe weather update later today. What we're looking at is a severe weather situation, much like what we see in the spring. We're looking at warm temperatures and warm, muggy air being blown in from the Gulf of Mexico today. That's why we have some of the light showers that are coming through right now. It came in earlier today at the point this is airing. We're looking at storms popping up in the mid to late afternoon hours. The timing is still a little bit in flux because this system has been speeding up a little bit and things have been changing. But for the most part, we're looking at probably 3 to 4 o'clock as far as those storms popping up. They'll be either in our area or probably just to our west, moving through, and then we could be seeing storms through 5, 6, 7 o'clock at least. So again, timing is hard to call with some of these things, but just be prepared for storms later tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. It shouldn't be an overnight deal. This is going to be one of those few times where I'm not up late covering storms, and that'll be a nice treat. But all modes of severe weather are possible here. We do have a likelihood that we'll see some form of strong winds, possibly damaging winds. Could see some large hail mixed in as well, and there is a tornado threat too. So just make sure you're plugged into elliscountyweather.com, following the latest updates. I will be staying on top of it. I kind of cleared my calendar for tomorrow. I'll be covering this all day, watching all those latest updates and making sure that you're informed.
EllisCountyWeather.com. Make sure you support your local weatherman, Mr. Kevin Crouch. He also has stars in different ways you can contribute to him. So look into that, because he's doing this and he's got to pay for equipment. I know, my operation is a lot smaller than yours, Kevin, but I know how much this little bit of equipment costs, and it costs money to get better and right. So on. So I want to thank you again for coming on. Can you hold on for after the show?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.